here in Indiana with a quick trip through the headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So, we found out this week that homicides and other violent crime are down in Indianapolis by nearly 30% in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same period last year. That is according to new national crime data. Indianapolis's drop is consistent with many of the nation's large and mid-sized cities, reinforcing a broader decline in violent crime since the pandemic surge. Jesse, does the data basically comport with what you're seeing there in the Circle City?
It definitely comports with what we're seeing actually living in the Circle City. It does not comport with what we are seeing in the way the media portrays the Circle City, especially the right-wing media.
Oh,
Which,
well, if it
yeah,
bleeds, it leads, right?
exactly right. I mean, to a certain extent, but then also, I spend way too much time on Twitter.com. It's evil, probably shouldn't do that, but I do it because I can engage with people who have very different political ideas than me. And I chatted with a person who works for IMPD, who was this is before the 2024 election. He was explaining how the high crime rates were why we needed to vote for Trump. And I had to get him to like pull up the FBI stats to prove that what he was saying was just total nonsense. And he was like, "Wow, I'm just like genuinely shocked by that." I was like, "Okay, and you are a police officer, so you have access to the raw data, but you're letting the spin dictate your view in reality." And like we see in Washington, D.C., what that does, it justifies all sorts of ridiculous militarism, et cetera, and police actions. But I think that like Democrats and lefties would do really well not to minimize the existing crime because it's still, like kids are still shooting kids over drama. Like there's very real violence and crime. None of it is tolerable, and we have to keep working on lowering that. But we just need to point out that it's not sending in a bunch of like SWAT teams with assault rifles that lowers crime. It's providing community centers. It's giving people economic mobility. And so we just need to insist that crime is intolerable, and that's why we need our programs, right? That's my little soapbox for the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to handle that stuff upstream. But also this week, we find that the Indiana National Guard is partnering with Saudi Arabia. So, under the Department of Defense's State Department, Department of Defense's State Partnership Program. Say that 5 times fast. This partnership includes the Indiana National Guard, the Oklahoma National Guard, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This program pairs American states and foreign nations to enhance relationships and promote defense and security cooperation objectives established by the U.S. and its partners. So, apparently, the Indiana National Guard's experience in disaster relief, domestic operations, and overseas missions will support the U.S. government's ongoing diplomatic development and security efforts to achieve shared goals. That is the diplomatic speak coming from the Daily Journal, where that story we found. Leslie, is what is the Indiana National Guard doing partnering with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
I don't know, but strengthening ties with more autocratic regimes and ones that um, don't support human rights. Personally, if it was up to me, I would want to partner with the Scandinavian countries like Denmark or Finland, and where people are treated more equally. And I think that's the whole problem with what we're seeing right now in our state and our country is this partnership and this admiration for more dictatorships or authoritarian countries like Hungary and Turkey and Russia, when we should be looking towards Denmark and Finland and Norway and Sweden, where women have more equality and people have universal health care. Those are the people that I would want to partner with. So I find it a little bit
As a
weird.
parent, it's like this is like when your kid starts hanging out with a new friend group, and I feel like the United States is not hanging out with the best friend group these days. Um, so Riley, did you see this one? There were Nazis hanging out in Indianapolis last weekend. This from the Indy Star. So there were fewer than a dozen members of this Nazi hate group walking the streets of downtown Indianapolis last weekend, and the police drove alongside them. Now, that visual did not sit well with a lot of people. And in an August 17th statement, IMPD Chief Chris Bailey pointed to the Constitution to understand why his department responded the way they did. And he says, quote, safeguarding First Amendment rights, even for those whose views we find reprehensible, is a responsibility we take seriously. But let me be clear, protecting those rights is not an endorsement of those beliefs. Not now, not ever. End quote. Is that a sufficient defense from Chief Bailey, do you think?
So it's a weird thing to say, but I do think he's right because it is unfortunately free speech and it is protected under the Constitution. And if you start divvying up the Constitution, be like, oh well, we're going to protect this types of free speech, or we're only going to protect this types of free speech, then you have the opportunity to start limiting yourself and for that to be returned on you. So I think that he is correct in saying it is free speech. We have to protect it, but it doesn't mean that we're agreeing with him or that it's right or morally good. I was actually downtown when this happened, and I don't live downtown. And they weren't out there for very long because in the 5051 signal, we were talking about it, and people went outside immediately and started looking for them to warn people to find out where they were, and they were gone like within minutes of them being reported. So they weren't out there for very long. These proud, brave boys with their masks and trying to invoke fear. I don't think they're very brave at all.
Listen, I saw some of these guys. They didn't look like they were in too great a shape. They probably couldn't have walked for very long. Yeah, that march didn't last too long. They're right to the donut shop and they're done. Um, Here's another one in central Indiana. Jesse, I don't know if you saw this one, how much you drive south of town, but at the Marion Johnson County line, there is a 14 by 48-foot digital billboard just off the right shoulder of the interstate saying, attention criminals, cross this line, you'll do more time. And that phrase is sandwiched between photos of Johnson County prosecutor Lance Hamner and Sheriff Dwayne Burgess. Is this just like tough guy posturing?
Yeah, it's just like the last thing I talked about, right? So it's talking about optics, it's talking about this imagined view. Like, first off, who self-identifies as criminals? It's like, oh man, my Hamburglar costume is still in my like trunk. How'd they catch me? Like no one thinks of themselves first and foremost as a criminal. Who is this billboard appealing to? And it's not criminals, of course. It's to people who already have this preconceived notion that Marion County is not tough on crime, et cetera. Like say what you want about law and order. Like I think we need way fewer people arrested and way lower sentences. But even if you disagree, you have to look at the fact that Indianapolis and Marion County have people incarcerated who are arrested all over the state. And we also have people here that are shipped here because they're indigent, and all the rural counties like, I don't know, we don't have any social programs. Go to Indianapolis; they'll take care of you. And we know desperation feeds crime. So it's once again just playing into this narrative that the big city liberals are just like delighting in crime running free because we love criminals here. It's just nonsense to anybody who would like sit and have a real conversation. But it's the type of nonsense that they think plays well with their base. So we're going to see more
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah, it really kind of plays into that. Oh, the city is big and scary, and
Oh,
out here in the suburbs, we're tough on crime.
right.
Right. And the last quick headline I wanted to look at before we dive deeper into some stories here is this one. Can't escape Todd Rokita any given week. This time, a story from Fox 59. So Rokita announced his office will review all state government contracts to determine if private businesses practice DEI requirements with their employees. He said that DEI practices, quote, treat people differently on the basis of race and sex when recruiting, hiring, promoting, and conducting other employment activities. So, State Senator Greg Taylor, a Democrat from Indianapolis, responded by saying, this is getting into the actual day to day operations of small businesses in the state of Indiana that want to include parts of their staff that the state doesn't see as so important. That should be a private business decision. We've got national businesses that want to do business here in the state of Indiana. And if they decide that they don't want to do business here in the state of Indiana, it could have a chilling effect on our people and the amount of bids we receive. Riley, did you see this from Rokita this week? You there?
Yeah, you cut out. Could you repeat that for me? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. What are your thoughts on this announcement from Rokita, and what do you say about Taylor's response?
So I like again, I think that whenever you start to implement legislation or rules about minute details of people's lives or their abilities to enact their private business, then you open yourself up to that being returned on you. We talked about before we went live about there are nonprofits who are being affected by this because they're having to rewrite their grants to be inclusive language or not have gendered language. But then you have organizations like women's domestic violence shelters that are then having to rewrite their grants to have non-gendered language, but it removes them from only serving a targeted population. So again, I think it's very interesting and unfortunate that the party of small government is trying to dictate people's lives and actions and just their business, literally.
Yeah, and actually stick a pin in government getting intimately involved with business, because we're going to come back to that later on in the show.